Greetings chosen, I've been waiting here for you since the beginning of this universe. You know the world is fading. There's a secret power hidden in your soul. Don't be afraid to use it. There are voices in your head saying that you're a failure. You're not good enough, but you know that's not true. There is a secret power hidden in your soul. Don't be afraid to use it, 'cause you're the one.
This might be my first time interviewing a real-life racist Nazi bastard.
From Acapulco, Mexico, this is Anarchast.
Greetings, mob rulers. Welcome to Anarchast, your home for anarchy on the internet. Today, we bring you a chat with the Dan Dix, who is an activist, a journalist, award-winning documentarian, YouTuber, and founder of Press for Truth. Welcome to the show, Dan Dix. How are you today?
I'm doing okay now, Patrick. Thanks for asking, man. It's been a crazy couple of days, but I'm all good.
This is the first time that I've actually interviewed a real-life racist Nazi fascist bastard, so I'm not sure quite how this is gonna go, but why do you hate black people so much?
Well, you know, if you were one of the hundreds of brain-dead zombies who fell into the groupthink mentality the other day, you would certainly believe that. That of course was the accusation being pinned against me by literally hundreds of people. I would suggest 95% of don't even know who I am or what my real intentions are or what I've done for the community as far as exposing police brutality here in Canada. So yes, if you were involved in this mob, then you would think that outrageous accusation is true.
I mean, it was kind of mind-blowing to sit there and just watch this unfold. Like, the first exposure I had to this was a bunch of my friends sharing your video, posting about on social media. Look, I've known this guy for 12 years. He's not a racist. He's not a Nazi. He's not a fascist. He's just a guy with a camera that runs a journalist operation. And so the mind-blowing thing for me was just imagining myself in that situation, because I have been to protests and I have, as an activist, not as a journalist, so I'm interested in finding out like the distinction involved there. But when I'm at these protests and I'm surrounded by people that have sometimes diametrically, viscerally opposed positions to mine, it can be terrifying, because there's like this power. And it's hard to describe unless you've probably been there. Maybe you can describe it for us. There's this power in the mob, and it is a terrifying power. Can you tell us what that felt like? And while you're doing that, I'll probably play some clips of your video in the background.
Sure, man. It was pretty intense, to say the least. It got really hairy at times, where I was completely surrounded. And just the anger, the hatred in the eyes of these people who are staring me down. You Nazi scum! Get out of here, you white supremacists! It was just unreal how quickly the mob descended into that mob mentality narrative that I'm this guy, I'm the big bad guy here. So yeah, at the time, it didn't feel very good at all, especially when you consider the fact that this is largely, to an extent, an anti-police brutality rally. Yes, it's in favor of Black Lives Matter, but it's mostly against police brutality. If these people knew that I made the documentary film in Canada on the Canadian police state and Canadian issues of police brutality, which I've exposed over 10 years ago in my film Into the Fire, maybe they would realize that I'm actually not diametrically opposed to what they're saying. I'm actually in support of some of the things they're saying. So they're essentially kind of attacking one of their own when I'm a guy who's been exposing the control of the state and the destructive police brutality measures that they take here in Canada. And then all of a sudden, I'm the bad guy. Just goes to show you how completely misguided these people are and how they take their cue from their masked leaders without question.
You know, when in my experience in being in these mob situations, it makes me think back to that TV show. It was like a trivia show. It was like, you are the weakest link, goodbye. And one of the options was to basically take a poll of the audience. And there was always sort of a level of higher wisdom when you started, when you included a bunch of people. But when I'm at these events, it is absolutely the opposite. The lowest common denominator sets the tone for sometimes hundreds, sometimes thousands of people. And that seemed to be exactly what happened when we watched your video. It kind of began with just somebody, I guess, seeing your photo and on her phone and labeled a Nazi or whatever. And then that just like kicked that was the lowest common denominator, and it kind of kicked the whole thing downhill. Where did they get your picture? What is there? Do they have some kind of like database of supposed Nazis or something? Like, how does this even work?
Well, just to provide some context into how we got up to that point is last week I attended a different Black Lives Matter rally. And at that rally, I was singled out by one individual who was dressed all in black with a black mask, and she had a bunch of other people with her. And she just pointed at me and said, "He's a bad man. Everybody block him." And all of a sudden, I was surrounded by about a dozen people who were saying, "Nazi, go home. Race is not welcome here." And I exposed that. I did a video explaining that whole scenario. That was last week. Fast forward to this week, where just a few days ago, I started getting the same accusations of being a white supremacist. And one girl comes up to me and she says, "Excuse me, isn't this you on the phone right here?" And I'm like, "Yeah, that's when I was surrounded by a bunch of Antifa calling me a racist last week. Yeah, that's right, that's me." And she said, "Well, apparently you're a known white supremacist." And I said, "Well, apparently you're wrong, because this is all unfounded." And that's when another lady jumped in and said, "I'm not going to question black women." I said, "What?" She said, "When a black woman says that you are a known supremacist, we don't question black women. You must be, because she says you are." And boom, just like that, the groupthink, the mob mentality kicked in. And what started out as a couple of dozen quickly grew to about 100. And I found myself surrounded by this mob who was wanting my blood. That's when the police decided to intervene. They came in and they kind of separated the crowd from myself. About a dozen cops formed a ring around me. But what they ended up doing was forcefully removing me from the event, physically dragging me out of there. And I pleaded with them to let me walk out. Like, I understand things are escalating. It's getting pretty intense. I should probably get out of here for my safety. But if you escort me out, aggressively in the manner that you're doing, it's going to justify it in the minds of these mad mobs that I am this Nazi racist who's deserving of being manhandled by the police. So I wanted them to just let me walk out, but they didn't. They forced me over to a park, and that's when the crowd grew from 100 to it doubled to about 200 people who are now very aggressively wanting my blood. And it was shortly after that I was physically assaulted. Somebody threw a bottle to the side of my head. That's when the police decided to kill two birds with one stone, and they decided to please the crowd and get me to safety by violently arresting me. And this is the main point I want to make today, Patrick. My biggest issue with how the police handled that situation is the very fact that they tried to attempt to kill two birds with one stone, in the sense that they wanted to please this mad mob who wanted my blood, keep them happy by putting on this display of violently arresting me, while knowing they're going to just let me go later, so they're protecting me. But what they did in that instance, because I heard the crowds cheer when I was arrested, they erupted in cheer. They legitimized it in the minds of that mob that I am worthy of being arrested, that I was arrested because I am this white racist nationalist. So yeah. The Vancouver Police Department has now put a target on my head. I can't go to another Black Lives Matter rally to cover it. All these people now think I'm a racist because it's been solidified in their minds by the Vancouver Police Department. So that's one of the biggest issues I have with how they handled the situation.
So why were you there? I think is a pretty valid question. Like, what were you doing there in the middle of that protest?
Well, this is an event that was drawing thousands and thousands of people to Vancouver. These are the types of events, if anybody has been covering my work on YouTube in particular over the past 13 or 14 years, these are the types of events I always cover. When there's a newsworthy event where thousands of people are protesting something as big as this, I'm there. I'm there to document it. I'm there to do some interviews. I'm there to capture footage should anything happen that needs to be revealed to the world. I'm just there to be a documentarian and to present the events as I see them unfolding. So this is another one of those events that was drawing thousands of people. Everybody's interested about this because of the George Floyd murder. So it's a very newsworthy event for me to go cover. So I did just that. And I ended up doing a live stream, Patrick, for over 3 hours of just walking around, doing my thing, filming some of the speeches, doing a couple of interviews, just getting a general feel of the whole event in a whole from my perspective. And it wasn't until I was ready to pretty much call it a day at the very end of it that all the madness started to happen. So my intentions were to bring awareness to the world of this event from the PFT perspective. And that's always been my goal.
And it's a perfectly valid goal, a perfectly valid reason for being there. And what I found, just to start off, when they showed you your picture and declared you a racist, if a person is a racist and you say, hey, you're a racist, you don't like black people, wouldn't they not respond with, well, no, you're wrong, I'm not a racist? Like, if they actually held those beliefs, right, why would they denounce them immediately, loudly, repeatedly? Good point.
A racist would probably be proud of it. Yeah.
And why is that not something that enters people's minds when they make these wild accusations like this? It's so dangerous.
Yeah.
And the fact
what's even crazier?
The fact that it's dangerous speaks to the fact that racism isn't ubiquitous, isn't everywhere. If it was not dangerous to say you're a racist, then maybe it's a problem, right?
Yeah. And I mean, this is a hypothetical I'll throw out there, and I don't want people to confuse this. But let's say myself or someone else there was a racist. Well, even that is not illegal in Canada, and I'm not justifying it. I'm not advocating for it or anything like that. Don't misquote me here. I'm just saying that in and of itself is not even illegal in itself. So even if I was, that's not something worthy of being arrested for and pulled out for. But regardless, I'm not. But the interesting thing that the crowd attempted to do was to create lies to justify their own narrative that is what I was. One girl said, this guy, he was going around saying black people ain't shit. A total fabricated lie. I would never say such a thing. But she's sitting there shouting that, and the whole crowd heard that. And they're like, what? He said that? Oh, my God. Boom. It just adds to the mob mentality. And now I'm labeled as this thing, which is absolutely ludicrous.
And irretractable. Like, this is not something that will ever go away for you for the rest of your life, no matter what you do. This will be a thing that probably haunts you, especially if you plan to intend to continue doing your job and covering events like this.
Maybe. Well, I put out the challenge. I said, hey, look, and I put it out on YouTube too. I said, I dare and challenge anyone to find anything I've ever said or ever done that would make you think in any way, shape, or form that I am a racist or a white supremacist. The challenge goes out there. Today, I continue to put the challenge out there to your audience. If anybody's skeptical, try to find anything I've ever said or done and to show that makes you think I'm a racist. And nobody ever can come up with an answer because they've fallen into the groupthink mentality. They assume this is what I am when I absolutely am not.
And the chance that even a single person that was in that mob is going to see any of your challenges or your claims and defenses of you not being a racist, they'll never see any of this, and neither would they even care, to be honest. Like, if they don't care about you standing right there and looking them in the eye and telling them and denouncing racists and racism, if they don't care about that, then they're not going to care about any of this. And that's kind of the point. Like, the police, if they were your rightful protectors and were actually doing their job, they would have protected you rather than grab you and haul you off and then eventually arrest you. What possible excuse did they have for arresting you? I can't even imagine. What happened with that?
Well, the initial reason for him arresting me was when he told me to stop filming. Now, I had just been physically assaulted by one of these angry mobsters who threw a bottle at the side of my head. Ping! So I just got physically assaulted. I'm not about to stop recording. And they knocked my camera rig apart. My GoPro went flying. I never did get that back. So now I only have one safety net in the sense of my camera to record everything that's going on. I was just assaulted. So the officer said, I need you to stop recording. And I just said, well, I can't do that. I know my rights. I know I'm allowed to film in a public space. I was just physically assaulted. So I said, no, I'm sorry. I can't stop filming. And that's when he's like, well, then you're under arrest. And I was like, what? For what? And then he grabbed the stream and it cut right there. Unfortunately, that's when the stream cut. So he essentially said I was under arrest for refusing to stop filming, which I know it's completely within my rights to do so, especially when I was just assaulted. And then they drove me downtown. I sat in the back of this paddy wagon for like an hour, cramped up with my arms cuffed behind my back, and eventually they opened the door and said, you are being charged, and you've been arrested, and you are being charged with disturbing the peace and assault. I was like, hang on a second here. You realize I'm the guy who was assaulted, right? Do you know who you're talking to here? I was the one who was assaulted. And that particular cop was just like, well, I wasn't there. I don't know the situation. I'm just here to read you your rights. And you are arrested. You are being charged with this. Do you understand? He read me all my rights. And then he said, do you want to call a lawyer? And I said, no, I don't feel I need to call a lawyer because I haven't done anything wrong. And then he said, okay, that's fine. That's your choice. And then they eventually came, put me in a cell. A few hours later, came and opened up the door and said, okay, you're free to go. But before they let me go, the one officer sat me down privately in the cell and said, look, these Black Lives Matter rally protests, they're going to continue. And if you're going to go to another one of these, you're going to end up using up our resources here. And we can't have that. So you better not continue to cover these rallies. You're a free individual. You can go if you want. But I strongly advise that you don't. And honestly, Patrick, I have no intention of going back to these things anyways. I mean, it's getting really crazy. But just to have the state kind of cram it down my throat after violating my own rights and threatening me not to show up so I don't use up their resources again is just such a slap in the face to someone like me. It's just ridiculous.
Yeah, don't make us do our jobs.
Yeah.
Don't make us spend our resources doing the thing that we exist to do. Another thing is, did you feel safe when you were in this moment? Like, how did you feel? What was it like being in the middle of this crowd yelling at you and assaulting you? Like, it must have, I mean, did the cops surrounding you, like, make you feel safe? Like, what did that feel like?
No, not exactly. When the cops surrounded me, that's when the mob grew and they became more and more aggressive. And they started shouting things like, why are you protecting this man? You're protecting a white supremacist. And that got everybody else more aggressive and more aggressive. So no, I didn't feel exactly safe. But that's why I've got cameras rolling at all times, one facing this way, one facing that way. Unfortunately, I lost all my GoPro footage, so I'll never know what that ended up looking like. But no, I didn't feel safe at all. And I knew that they don't even have to be within arm's reach of getting at me. And of course, they didn't have to be. And I think it was coordinated, that attack. Somebody threw a bottle. I mean, I'm surrounded by cops. So it's a pretty ballsy move to come in and assault me, but they threw a bottle at the side of my head, and it was like it was coordinated, because as soon as that happened, all the attention went over here, and then somebody came in from the right and smashed my camera gear. My phone went flying that I'm streaming from. My GoPro went flying. The officer then grabbed me. I was able to pick up my phone at the last second, but the GoPro was nowhere to be seen, and he whisked me off and eventually had me arrested. So no, I didn't feel safe at all. It was pretty scary at times, to be honest.
One of the things I know, when I have a lot of friends that do cop-related activism, First Amendment auditing, the cop watching type stuff, and they always teach each other to do this this angle that you've done with your camera here, where you put your back sort of to the enemy and you show your face with them behind you. Because like when the police are behind you, the cops can't say that you were threatening them because you're literally, turning your back to them and facing away from them and recording them and you at the same time. But when I'm watching this video, man, I'm just cringing the whole time because there's a lot of potentially violent attackers behind you, and you are doing the thing. You're pointing the camera at you and recording behind you. But wow, like I'm just worried for your safety the whole time. And I mean, I admire your bravery to go out and get this footage, but wow, like it was just terrifying to watch.
Yeah, it was. I mean, a lot of people are now suggesting I, kind of hire some actual professional security. I don't want it to have to come to that. I'm pretty shocked that it has, but essentially it kind of has come to that, and that's just ridiculous in this day and age. When people can't have a rational discussion, we and I'm not even talking about a debate. I'm just talking about a rational discussion. That's what I tried to bring to the table with these people. If you watch the video, I'm being very calm and as rational as I can be with these aggressive protesters, but they're not interested in that. They're not interested in actually learning from one another so we can progress. Because look, I'm all for the same things. I don't want fascism. I don't want racism. I don't want police brutality. I'm in favor of the same things that these people are in favor. It's just they've been steered into a particular direction because of this cultural Marxist revolution, this undertaking of the education system over the last couple of decades, where they've been brainwashed into this collective groupthink mentality, so that if they appear to see someone such as myself attacking anyone in the group, wrongfully perceived, but if that's what they perceive, then it's an attack on them as an individual. It's because of cultural Marxism, which has overtaken the schools, and we're now starting to see it display itself throughout society, and it's extremely ugly.
The younger generation has definitely been weaponized by Marxism in colleges and just by the police themselves with the police brutality, which you have created documentaries on. It's fascinating. So what this shows, and there was another video recently of some guys in their house, thumbs upping protesters marching by, and the protesters like smashed their window with a brick anyway, even though they're like showing support for the cause or whatever. This stuff shows that these mobs, these protesters, are merely hiding behind this veneer of principle. They're using protest of a very valid injustice, in my opinion, to do a lot of new evil, a lot of fresh evil, to create a lot of new victims. And the fact that they'll even harm people that support them just sort of reveals that fact that there isn't a principle at play behind what they're doing. They're just being ragey, indoctrinated, sort of weaponized teenagers or something.
Yeah. And let's not discount the fact that these kids have essentially been locked up for the past couple of months. Look, isolation and this whole quarantine thing, lockdown, plays funny things on the mind. It's not healthy for the human psyche, emotionally, physically, and spiritually. And these kids are fed up and they're ready to go and take their anger out on the state, but they're doing it in the wrong way. Look, if you have a problem with, let's say your burger at a restaurant, you don't essentially take it, if they put in something that's going to kill you, you don't take it out on the cashier. You go all the way up to the top. Well, in my view, the problem here are the international banksters. And again, if you know that that's the problem, you don't walk into a bank and take it out on the cashier there. No, you pull a Karen essentially, and you speak to the manager, and you speak to that manager, and you speak to that manager, and you go all the way to the top. So if we really want to hack at the root of the issues here, we can't be looking at this as a race war, as a black against white. It's the state versus humanity. And that's how we have to look at this moving forward. And we as voluntarists and anarchists need to always take the side of the innocent and be against the aggressors, whether that be the police or the looters. It depends on the situation, right? So if the cop is hurting an innocent person, we're on the side of the innocent and against the aggressor. But if these violent looters are engaging in destructive activity against private businesses, we're on the side of the innocent private businesses and against the aggressive looters. It's not so black and white here moving forward. So I hope people understand that as they try to bait us into this race war, that we need to focus on the real problem. And that is international banksters who are loaning at interest by printing money out of thin air, which gives them the ability to clamp down on society in any way they want. So moving forward, Patrick, people need to decentralize. People need to remove themselves from all aspects of government in every way, shape, and form possible if we want to have any hope of moving forward here in any kind of a progressive way.
Very, very true. And for those watching, I've just put the link to Dan's GoFundMe in the chat. If you could tell us about your GoFundMe and where it's at and how it's going.
Sure. Well, I mean, I initially put it up because I lost a GoPro camera that was a gift from my wife, and all total, it came up to about $800. I think the GoPro was $650 or $700, and then there was an extra battery, and then extra, little add-ons and things that you had to all said in total. It was about $800. So that's significant for myself. So I put it out there for, hey, if anybody is upset with what they saw happen to me and they want to pitch in. So that I can get my GoPro back, please do so. And I also mentioned in the GoFundMe campaign, and if any contributions come beyond myself getting a GoPro, it's greatly appreciated because I need all the support I can get moving forward with Press for Truth. I've been demonetized on YouTube and all that sort of stuff. So thankfully, people have begun to support me in that way, which, I can't stress enough how much I appreciate that, because it is something I need moving forward. So I'm quite pleased to see that people are actually responding to this incident. They're seeing the injustices that happened against me, and they're pitching in financially to support my efforts. It's really nice to see.
I mean, it's really illustrative journalism. You've both exposed sort of the riotous mob as an unprincipled mob that it is, and you've also made a very valid point with the police that what they do is definitely not always protecting the good guys and getting the bad guys. Did they even catch the guy that hit you in the face with the thing? Do you have any idea?
They did. Guess what?
Oh.
They arrested him, and he was in one of the paddy wagons. We all got taken down, and he was released. He was released without charge, just like I was. I assume it was the same thing. A few hours later, they just let him go. And the reason why we know that is because one of the persons who was arrested with me when he was let out saw this guy being let out too. And he just walked free. So yeah, they actually grabbed the guy who hit me with the bottle and later just let him go. I didn't know about that until after he was already gone.
So they're basically useless.
Yeah.
They arrest the good guys and let the bad guys go.
Yeah, their tactic...
Go ahead.
Their tactic of trying to please the crowd while keeping me safe was an absolutely wrong decision to make. They kowtowed to the mob in order to please them at the expense of my reputation moving forward and now being pinned as a white supremacist. I pinned a great deal of that blame on the Vancouver Police Department. I think they kind of were acting in good intentions in the sense that they thought they could kill two birds with one stone, keep me safe, keep the crowd happy. But what ended up happening is they pinned a target on my head moving forward. And that is something that is very wrong that I may have to deal with in terms of litigation moving forward.
I mean, I kind of hope that you do, because that can ruin your career and completely destroy your ability to cover these events like you did. Like you just said, I think you just said, correct me if I'm wrong, that you do not plan on returning to a protest like this to cover it. Why? Because if your reason is because you are now a pariah, well, the cops helped make you that pariah, right?
Yeah, and I have no intention in continuing to escalate these sorts of tensions when it's completely unfounded. It serves me no purpose anymore. I wanted to go to these things to cover them in as much as a neutral light as possible. Of course, every journalist has their own bias. I'm going to bring my own opinion to the event certain times here and there. But that's been my intention all along, and I can no longer do that because they've now pinned me the enemy. It's unreal that we've come to this stage in the world, but here we are in Vancouver, Canada, where a guy like me can be accused of racist and the cops take their side and I get arrested.
I'm terribly sorry that this happens. I'm glad that you were able to come on the show and talk about what happened today and expose both sides of this for sort of the frauds that they are. I can't imagine a more effective bit of journalism for somebody to do. So thank you for your service to the world. I appreciate you. Is there anything else that you'd like to talk about? Did we miss anything, or that you would like to direct people towards?
I don't know. I mean, I guess just moving forward, I want to reiterate the fact and just drive it home that it's the state versus you and me, okay? And we really need to stop looking at this as a racial divide. You know, a lot of people were looking at my live stream and they said, you know, he was saying bad things about some of the speeches, the speakers at this talk, which is proof that he's a racist. It's like, well, no, one of the girls was being rude and the other guy was being ignorant. It had nothing to do with this color of their skin. I'm calling out certain speeches for what they said because I didn't like what they were saying. It has nothing to do with the color of their skin. It's just ridiculous. So I hope people can begin to look beyond that and realize the real enemy that they have here has always been the state. It's always been the government. And more centralized control, more power towards the state is not what we need, which is what most of these people are calling for. So I really just want to hammer it home that your problem lies with the international private banksters who are putting you in debt. If you're able to get out of debt, that's the great first step. Whether that means not having a mortgage, not having a line of credit card, get a line of credit, don't have any multiple credit cards, any of that, do so. That is the most important thing moving forward. It's easier said than done, but I know you can do it. And I think that's what we all need to work towards in the future. So that's just what I wanted to leave people with. If you did see the video and you do want to support my efforts, please check out the GoFundMe campaign. I think it's called Dan Dix Attacked Gets Arrested or something like that. But please do check it out. Any support is very greatly appreciated. But bottom line, Patrick, I'm not going to let any of this intimidate me. I'm going to continue to press for truth no matter what moving forward.
All right, sir. Well, thanks for coming on the show and telling us your story. And thank you for not letting the intimidation stop you from doing what you do. And until next time, peace, love, and anarchy.